Hello, members. This is Tom Morrison right here in Jacksonville, Florida, the corporate offices of the Metal Treating Institute. We're excited to talk today about outsourcing of heat treating. Are you getting your fair share? We have two phenomenal guests who've been doing this for many years today, Benny and Michael. We're going to let them introduce themselves in just a few minutes. A couple elements I want to keep you in tune with is the chat box. If you hover on the bottom of your screen there, you'll see a thing pop up called chat. You click that, and on the right-hand side at the bottom, you'll see where it says type message here. If you hear a comment or want to make a comment or have a question for Michael or Benny or myself on this topic, please click in there, and you can type in your question, and I'll be monitoring that, and I will ask them any questions they have. Or if you have comments or answers to things that are asked that you want, feel free to chime into the conversation. So a couple things before we get started, MTI happenings. The big news of the day, starting with this conference, we were just in Vancouver, Canada this past week for our MTI fall meeting, had 195 people there, and oh, Michael was there, and it was such a good time. The content we heard was some of the best yet. Big topic of conversation was cybersecurity, something you're all going to want to be putting your hands on over the next couple months. We're going to have a webcast in December on the keys to cybersecurity. But the big news of the day was MTI, the Metal Treating Institute, is going to be moving its national offices to Nashville, Tennessee, come the week of Thanksgiving. We'll be up there fully. Tom Morrison Associates, the management company, us, is going to be moving there with it. So nothing is changing. Staff is intact. We're going to have new offices. We're going to actually be more regionally located to have more southern regional meetings for people that want to come to Nashville. A lot of members are excited about that. So great happening starting off the decade of the 20s in a big way. And we're excited to be able to serve you another decade from Nashville, Tennessee. So the notice has been sent out to your accounts payable people to send the bills there starting in November. We'll be making a big announcement about it in a news release through our weekly e-news and newsletter in this coming month. So that's the big news of the month is we're moving the offices to Nashville and going to have a great time there and serving you. The second big thing is at the foundation, at the MTI fall meeting on the final night, get this number. We raised on that final night $46,000 for the MTI Educational Foundation amongst people that were in the dinner that night. It was incredible how many people gave $1,000, $2,500. One member even gave a $10,000 contribution because we gave away 11 scholarships for $52,000 this past year, showed a video, and the amount of emotion that these kids are showing about how much they appreciate us helping them move through their college education, trade school education is amazing. So big deal with the $46,000. We'll be giving away more scholarships come January of next year. And then Furnaces North American 2020, you're going to want to mark September 29th to October 3rd on your calendar, the largest heat treat only trade show and business conference in 2020. It's a who's list going to be there in terms of suppliers and speakers. So mark that on your calendar. Make sure you and your top 3 to 4 people have a chance to get there. Your production manager, your operations manager, your safety manager, your quality person, anybody in that realm, technical-wise, you want to have them be there at that show. It is going to be a great show and a record attendance in Louisville, Kentucky, September 29th to October 2nd and 3rd. So right now, let's get into the thing that we came here to listen to today is outsourcing of heat treating. Are you getting your fair share? I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves for about 30 to 45 seconds, just so you get a sense of who they are. So, Michael, let's start with you. Tell the MTI world a little bit about Michael Mouilleseaux.
Sure. My name is Michael Mouilleseaux. I'm the general manager of Erie Steel Limited. You know, folks come into this business from all kinds of different realms. I came into this via metallurgical engineering. I've been doing this commercially for 40-some years, and I actually did a stint in the captive world, big business for 4 or 5 years. We can talk about the trials and tribulations of that sometime.
Great. Benny, how about you?
I'm Benny Grissom. I'm president of Pinson Valley Heat Treating. Been at Pinson now 32 years, I believe, 32 years. Really the only job I've ever had, but started off here running furnaces and loading furnaces and went to school and just kind of worked my way up through. I was in sales for about 20 or 25 years. And I still do some business development now.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for being here. You know, when it comes to the element of heat treating, a lot of people don't know the numbers behind it, but when you look at total heat treating, industrial heating and MTI has done some pounding of the numbers in the recent past, and there's somewhere between 27 and $30 billion of heat treating that's done between in-house and out and commercially in Canada and the United States. And the numbers that we come up with are about 12.5 to 13% of that is done by commercials. So somewhere between about $3 billion of commercial. That leaves $27 billion hanging out there that's being done in-house. And we've always done this concept that if we could just move the needle 1%, if we could just move 1% of heat treating done inside to commercial heat treaters, that would be about $1 to $1.5 million of new business per MTI member. I mean, that's per member. And if you add that to the bottom line, with many people, a lot of people still having capacity to grow without adding new labor or machines, I mean, a lot of that goes to the bottom line. So that's what we're excited about this topic, about creating a story that you can go out and tell captives so you can draw them in and want them to do more business with you. So with that being said, so let's start with Michael. Michael, and we're going to let Benny will chime into this as well, but how long has your company, Erie Steel, been in the world of attracting captive markets, and what has it been to you as opposed to getting piecemeal work to when you can get these partnerships in and draw a captive into doing business with you?
Sure. So we've been doing this for a while. I would say with real intent for the last 10 years. And you know what? We've reconfigured this company because of that. So as opposed to being a job shop type of operation, we've really changed ourselves into a provider of high volume serial production, precision carburizing, and that's changed our business dramatically. One thing is that we've been really fortunate that much of this business, we've secured this on the basis of a contract. So we have a large portion of our business, not only is it serial production, but it's on a contract basis. And that's a level of security that you have in your business that you don't have when you're just working on a job shop basis.
Awesome. Now, how about you, Benny? Pinson Valley.
I think we've pursued it a while. In our market where we are, the real volumes came from captive shops.
Sure.
So for me, I would pursue it for the last 20, 25 years just to try to get those volumes into the plant. And as you said, if you can get those volumes in, then some of those other dollars are incremental at the end of the month and hit the bottom line that way. But, for us, we're still a job shop, but we do actively pursue, those captive shops, and we always have, really.
Right. So let me ask both of you a question. In pursuing captive business now versus, say, 15, 20 years ago, has anything changed in how you look to pursue them?
Well, I would say absolutely yes. So the difference is, I think that number of years ago, what you had overflow that kind of morphed into an opportunity for long-term business. Today, we're not really looking for overflow business. You know what? Overflow business, it's simply opportunity business, and it's very fickle. When we're looking for contracts, the time horizon on these things is 2 or 3 years. And I mean that. It's 2 or 3 years that we're working for these things. And what you're dealing with is the entirety of the organization. So these opportunities, first of all, they come to you because they're relationship-based. If folks don't know who you are, very seldom are you going to have an opportunity for it. So on the basis of a relationship, you're going to get an opportunity. But what you have to recognize is that you're not dealing solely with the folks in purchasing. You're going to have people in engineering. You're going to have people in metallurgy. You got people in production. You have people in logistics that you have to deal with. And if you can't go across the spectrum with all of these different disciplines in a corporation, you're not going to be successful. And that's also one of the reasons that it takes so long to wrestle one of these things to the ground.
Right. What about you, Benny? What's your thoughts on that?
I would agree with that. And I think for us, there was a big push for a while to outsource. Everyone wanted to get lean, so outsourcing was kind of the business model for a short window. And to me, that opened the gate for us to build those relationships that Michael's talking about. But then everyone started contracting back, I think, because they wanted control. They wanted the efficiencies internally and those things. So they started to contract back and thought doing it in-house was, a better method or a more cost-prohibitive method. But I think, like Michael said, that opportunity to look at people's order of operation and build those relationships with all those different people helps when you start to go after someone doing it captive, because you're not just dealing with a purchasing agent. You're dealing with a quality manager that demands the quality be at a better level than what they can do internally. And you got logistics. You got guys on the receiving end that expect product to be there just in time, just like if it was coming from the building next door. So I think now you do have to navigate, the whole order of operation, and you really have to do that and do it well, because if you can't add value to each one of those orders of operation,
right,
you get that business.
So, and some of it I would assume is understanding the captive's overall business better than they do almost, so you can understand where you get to add value so they can do their business better. I mean, would that be a true statement?
Sure would.
I would think so. And I think, if you can help them understand their core competencies, a lot of them would say heat treating is not a core competency.
Right.
They're not on the cutting edge of technology. They don't have the resources to network and find out what's working when they have an issue. So, they're all limited on the dollars they can spend in-house. And I think working with them and letting them spend those dollars, or guiding them to spend those dollars to focus on their core competencies, also creates an avenue so that you can get more of that work, and they'll let you do it because you can do it better, as long as you're adding that value.
Right. Well, Michael, you and I talked about it earlier this morning. So you just don't have a division that does heat treating. When you decide in-house heat treating, you're getting into the business of heat treating. You just have one client, and it's yourself, correct?
Exactly. And, if you haven't been in an internal heat treating operation, those of us in the commercial business, we assume that the manufacturing engineers in these big businesses, they're in love with their heat treating operation. They're in concert with them. They're working together. They're improving what they're doing. And nothing could be further from the truth. They're at loggerheads. You've got your department to run. I've got my department to run. And when you're optimizing things, that may not necessarily help me.
Right.
However, if you outsource this thing, what you can demand from someone who you are paying for a service is a much higher level of a turnaround, competency, technology. You can demand all of those things from a supplier that you cannot do internally.
Right.
And once you recognize that and you latch onto those things, those are all things that we can offer these big businesses.
And I would assume, hearing that though, is that today, with company culture being such a big deal to retain and keep employees, more of that conflict you can outsource outside, the less conflict you have inside, which can't ruin your workplace culture amongst departments, I would assume.
Right. So the other thing that you need to be able to do is you need to use technology for communication with all of these departments. Mm-hmm. So because you are not internal, you are not on their internal email system, you need to find a way. We utilize a customer portal, so folks can come into it, they can use their name and a password, and they get access to financial information, production status, invoicing, quality information, and that kind of makes those things transparent for those folks, and you actually become part of their organization.
Right. So one of our members in Texas here is asking, so when you look at your contracts, Michael, you talked about contracts. Benny, I'm sure y'all have them. How long are the project contracts go for? I mean, how do you work through those?
So for us, these are multiple year contracts in excess of 3 years. So the gig with that is, obviously, if you're going to have a multi-year contract, the pound of flesh that the purchasing folks get is obviously some kind of an annual cost out. Mm-hmm. What we get in, the quid pro quo for that. Probably shouldn't say that in today's political.
No politics.
The quid pro quo for that is that we are given the first right on any new business. Right. So, and you just have to understand that big business for heat treating is not their core competency. They're not cost effective with it, so they assume that we are not also. So their assumption is that whatever you quote them today, you're gonna find a way, if you do it for a multiple number of years, you're gonna find a way to be far more efficient. So you have to give some of that back. That's the cost of entry for those.
Right. What about you, Benny?
Well, we really don't have a lot of contracts. And so, sometimes that's a little scarier, but I think from my perspective, it makes us work harder for it too. I think what Michael said, I think he hit on a key point there, where he was talking about internal shops and one department's not communicating with the other. And really what Michael did is he's telling the heat treater, there's your avenue for adding value. If you can do that, and that communication from you is better to that next department than it would be from their own internal department, now you've got raving fans inside that captive shop that are begging to outsource that heat treating so that, you know, Pinson Valley can do it, because our information going to the next department is better than what they would get internally. And that's really what our people have done a great job of doing, is providing that information to where, you know, some of our raving fans are department managers, because they can trust our data better than they could have from the data they were getting from the department next door.
Right.
So I think Michael said was really kind of uncovering one of those things, that those are the little things that add value that wind up at the end of the day mean whether or not you're going to get that book of business.
Yes, and so Benny, you'll cover it in a second in terms of what you do from non-contractual standpoint. Another question that was posed, Michael, so what are some of the key bullet points, things that when you're looking at if you're going to do a contract, what are some of the key elements that you would say you want to make sure that you cover these in the contract, so there's a good understanding on both sides? And Benny, you chime in after this from how y'all handle it.
Now, I want to sit here and learn, because I want to get contracts.
So maybe the first thing is you need to get all of the financial things in order and agreed upon. So if there's going to be a cost down, I would actually make a schedule and present it to the customer, and we're going to agree that this is the price for this part number in year 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's not you're calculating 1% on top of 1% and you're rounding up and I'm rounding down. We agree to an actual number. So if you do that and you get that out of the way, there are a lot of issues that you can eliminate because of that.
Right.
Then the other thing it has to do with delivery is going to be the next thing. So I'm going to agree to a specified delivery time, a maximum turnaround time, as it were. If I can't reach that, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, if I can't turn your product around, I'm going to work a weekend to catch you up, and that's at no cost. I may say to the customer, if I've worked all week, you haven't given me the product because you can't produce it, and you can only give it to me on Friday night, and you want it back on Monday morning, there's a cost to you for that.
Sure.
So we're gonna bake those things in, and we're going to agree to it. You're going to agree to a problem resolution method. Mm-hmm. So we have the MTI standard of workmanship, and you have to know that all of these big folks, they have 20 or 30 pages of number 3 font that's going to pertain. What we're going to say is that if there's an issue, we're going to work it out, and the basis for starting on that is going to be the MTI standard.
Gotcha.
Now, does that mean that I'm only going to pay, twice the heat treating cost? Not necessarily, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to work at this thing. We got to be partners.
Sure.
So all of those things that could possibly come up in a relationship, you want to specify those things and at least stipulate some methodology for resolution.
Well, and I would assume in a contract of heat treat and the servicing of it, anything can happen. You never leave anything to assume that it can't happen, because it's probably going to happen at some point in time if it's a 3-year relationship.
Exactly. Do
you want to cover
I can promise you that nothing bad will ever happen, but what I can promise you is that I'll work to resolve it.
Well, I assume a customer, it brings them closer to you when you admit that, look, we know something's probably going to go wrong, and we want to help. We want to hear from you how you would like to help us handle that when and if it does happen.
Yes. Yes.
So Ben, any comments from you on that?
No, I think that's very interesting, and I think the due diligence on the front end is obviously key in those relationships. I just wish that we could get to that point and get something in writing to where we did have a contract.
Right.
Well, a little better about that.
So let's walk into question 2, which is, what are captives in your opinion? And I want to approach it through this element that when you're looking at getting a captive, especially if you're looking to try and get them to move a big proportion of their heat treat to you, that somehow in some senses puts the division of heat treat manager's job on the line. And so how do you get through that guy or that lady to say, look, we want to be your partner, not do away with your job value? And then how do you get to the buyer and the engineers to have that discussion? And what are the captives what do you think the captives are looking for ultimately when they want to do business with a commercial heat treater? So it's kind of twofold. How do you get past the division of heat treat so he doesn't feel threatened, to the engineers and the buyers? And what is the captive shop actually looking for when they're looking to do business in a commercial sense?
Well, I think for us, the first big thing, and we do a lot of work for a lot of captive shops, was there's always that fear factor. There's a fear of, we have to meet a deadline and I'm going to give you these parts and you're going to run them at 1600 degrees and throw them in water or oil and oh my gosh, what am I going to get back? And so there's that fear factor. And I think you got to cross that hurdle first, and it's usually pretty slow. But, you know, we do a lot of work with some that are union and non-union, and I think those are two different approaches. Because the union lends itself to other issues when they are relocating people. But I think it's so difficult right now to find good people.
Right.
What I found is most guys that work at a lot of the captive shops would rather relocate to a different department, but they're there because they don't have an option.
Right.
And we've kind of worked with some of our customers now to where they've relocated guys to actually better positions for those guys when they pulled them out of the heat treat, and then we started running that product. And it was a very slow process. I mean, you know, it's like Michael said, some of these things can take, you know, 1, 2, 3 years to develop.
Right.
I think, you know, the groundwork's got to be set, and it has to be mindful that it is a slow progression on a lot of them. But I think the fear factor there is really the biggest thing that you have to overcome. It has been for us. Do
you feel like having these kind of conversations with them, as well as maybe having them come in and invite them into a plant tour so they can see the quality, the expertise, the equipment, the investment you have, does that play a part in making that better?
Yeah, absolutely, for us. And what's very difficult is a lot of them can't leave their shops to even come visit our shops. So, you know, at one point we had pictures, we had videos, we had all these things that, you know, before technology like this, that would allow them to tour our facility without being there. You know, our quality manual, what do we do? And I think, you know, being proactive and documenting all those things, like Michael said, that could happen, and then here would be our reaction to those things. I think that starts to settle some of the fears. But I think if you can ever get them in your shop, in most cases,
right,
they're the level of quality that the commercial heat treaters do, that in most cases is better than what they have internally. And I think that is a big selling point. You know, I would say we close most of the deals if we can get them at our facility.
Right. Michael, what about you guys?
Well, my perspective is a little bit colored by what I did in the captive world, right? So I'm in a facility that's got 4,500 people in it, and there's 150 people in the heat treating. So at the time, it was the largest heat treating operation in North America. Now, those 4,500 people, they had to go out and find people who would work in the heat treat. That was not the primary job that anybody was looking for.
Right.
Okay, so I'm colored a little bit on that. But as we've dealt with things, every opportunity is unique. It can be, you know, recognize the fact that they're typically in these kinds of environments, there's been a lot of money reinvested in this thing. They haven't reinvested in equipment, in controls. They certainly haven't invested in people or in process.
Right.
There are opportunities there, but the question becomes how. And the whole basis for that is you got to have someone with a relationship with that plant who can talk with upper management in that plant to find out what those opportunities are. And then you find an opening, and it's all about problem solving. And the problem solving could be a process problem. It could be a delivery problem. It could be pre-machining problems. They're just a raft of things. There is no singular template for that. Every one of these things is unique. So the consequence of that, you say, well, you're going to put the heat treating department out of business. The last opportunity that we had that was really a significant size, we in fact did that. They never showed us the heat treating operation in this internal plant for the 2 years that we were doing this. We got to go into the laboratory, the metallurgical lab. We got to go in the metallurgist's office. We saw all of the engineering folks, but we never saw the heat treat. And when we went out, after we were successful, when we finally went out and we looked at the heat treat, we said to ourselves, if we had that and you came to us, you would have run. And that's because this was a 1960 vintage operation that they'd never put any capital into. And you can understand perfectly well why they're trying to do it.
Right. So hearing that, both Benny and you, would you say that because each proposition is unique, that it's incumbent upon the heat treater to really try and find out where those friction and anxiety inside the business model is, so you know where the highest value for your offering will be?
You absolutely do.
Yeah, I agree with Michael. You got to be a problem solver and not a peddler. And I think you and Tom talked about that. Those are two different things. If you're a problem solver, you're looking to add value. And like Michael said, you want to address the issues that are their real concerns. That's how you win that business. A peddler is going to go on price, and we're not talking about price.
Right.
We're talking about adding value.
So let's move into question 3, which really begins to talk about how do you tell the story to sell the services. And I know, Benny, you mentioned to me, we were at the forging industry where we both spoke at, and you had a great book that you basically said every MTI member should read this book, and it'll tell them what they need to do from a business standpoint. There it is. Jump into the goal and tell us what's behind that.
This is a book that's taught in most business schools, and it's called The Goal. And it's by Eli Goldratt. It's a bestseller, been around for years. Eli was a physics guy. He wasn't a business guy. But the premise of the book is really, it centers around constraints and bottlenecks. And it's more of an operational book. But if you read the book, there's a lot to be learned about plant efficiencies, order of operation, bottlenecks, constraints, how you deal with those things. So it's a great book from that perspective. But in the book, in the manufacturing facility that Eli is talking about, the constraint is heat treating. So I think it's very applicable here.
Nice.
So I read the book from a process standpoint, learning about order of operation, learning about efficiencies and those things. But then it dawned on me that I needed to read it again from a different perspective, because everything that Eli was addressing in the book is what our potential customers are going through right now. So if you read it from that perspective, it becomes a great sales tool, because now I can get in the head of a captive shop and what all the problems they're having are. And really, if I've got that, I can come up with a script for my next sales call of what I really need to address. It makes me more aware to where I can be a problem solver. So I would recommend reading The Goal for a lot of reasons. One, to learn about constraints and bottlenecks and those things, but 2, to read it from the perspective of this is what our customers are thinking, or our potential customers that have internal heat treating, and what kind of bottleneck constraint does that put on them. So I would recommend reading the book. It's helped me a lot.
So who do you think should be reading that book? Should it be just the owner, or should he kind of get a copy for him and his key management so that everybody's on the same page of how to approach the customer?
Well, I've had our management group read the book, and we've all talked about it and gone through it together. Just, operational people to understand what our bottlenecks are.
Right.
But from a sales guy, you can have a different conversation about these are what our customers are saying internally at their meetings that we're not a part of.
Right.
These are the issues they're having. So I really think you can use it from a production standpoint, but you can also use it as a sales tool.
So any comments, Michael, after hearing that?
I agree completely with what he's talking about, constraints. When you say what the story that you're going to tell, you know what it's about? It's about capability. It's about turnaround. It's about your team. It's about how you can support people. And eventually, do you get to cost effectiveness? You certainly do. But it's about being able to support the entirety of the organization.
Right.
You hear me rail on about that. But truly, if you can't support all of the functions in that organization in some way. So is every function a decision maker? Not a key decision maker, but you know what? Each one of them has got a right of refusal. So you got to make sure whatever is key to them, that you don't let that become a roadblock on the way.
Right. So when it comes to telling the story in the next phase of the question, so we've talked about eliminating constraints, better communication, deciding what the value chain is so you can chime in there and fix their problems for them. So now let's enter an area where we can't talk about specific costs, but what we want to talk about, as one of our members just threw it out here on the line that we talked about constantly, that Benny, like you said, that you asked the guy, says, well, we want to do your heat treat. Why wouldn't you let him? He says, well, we can do it cheaper than you. And your answer was?
How do you know?
Exactly. So let's talk about let's talk about cost from a philosophical standpoint of how do you overcome that particular objection? Because selling is all about overcoming objections because that's when selling really starts. So for those people out there that's going, well, they always tell me that they can do it cheaper than me. And many people I've heard heat treaters say, well, they don't understand what all their costs are. So I know both of you have gone through me a process where you've shown me how you deal with that. So Benny, let's start with you, and with Michael, we'll get to you. How do you go about overcoming that for the heat treat?
Well, I think first, and again, when we were at the steel foundry thing, my whole discussion there was centered around cost. I think, you go into a captive shop, and it's like the gentleman told me, I can do it cheaper than you. And I asked him nicely, how do you know? And he said, I just know I can. But he really didn't know his cost. And I think we have to understand our own internal costs before we can go to a captive shop and have a discussion with them about cost.
Right.
And so for us, we try to measure our cost, and we try to capture everything so that we do understand what our costs are. And then when we do go to a captive shop, we can share the model that we use internally with them. And what I've found is it starts to expose to them things that they never considered were true costs in their heat treat.
Right.
And get someone to where they're at least looking at that and considering that, and now they're trying to understand their true cost. Mm-hmm. And so I think at that point, there's some transparency there to where you have discussions centered around cost. And I think to Michael's point earlier, then you can really discuss, what do we do if natural gas goes up? What do we do if there's a change here? And now you're having a discussion about real changes that probably will take place.
Right.
But unless you know your own cost, it's real difficult to go into a captive shop and say, I can do it as efficiently as you can do it, because you don't know that.
Right. So would you say it's a different mindset? Michael, we'll shift to you. Would you say that it's a different mindset, understanding that you're dealing with someone that doesn't run a bottom line, they run a budget, which is two totally different concepts?
Totally different. So the way that cost is calculated, as I said to you before, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a template, and I'm going to say, let's say you have a batch furnace. So do I understand the operation of a batch furnace? I think that I do. I can look at it. I can make a judgment as to what the energy input is, how often you're going to use it, what a duty cycle is. You tell me what the gas is. I can tell you what your annual gas costs will be if you tell me how long you're going to run it. Do the same thing with electricity. Make a judgment on quench oil. Make a judgment on how often you're going to change tubes, fans, rails, fixturing. Put those costs together. Those kind of things to the cost of a piece of equipment, that's pretty standard, but you'd be amazed that most big businesses don't have an idea of what a unit cost is. Then you get into the labor thing, and that's where there's a lot of opportunity. So they're going to say, well, I just got this guy that's running this thing. Really? So how do the parts get there? Well, somebody else does that. Have you accounted for that? No. Well, how do the parts get inspected? Well, are you accounting for that? No. And once you bring all of these ancillary things together, and you put those together, and then you talk about how much work are you actually getting out of equipment, and you look at a unit cost on something like that, quite honestly, people are amazed because they never look at it at that basis. They have a standard methodology. As I said, you take all of the burden and you apportion it on a square foot basis. And relative to the manufacturing, heat treating is not very much. Right. They don't allocate burden appropriately.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would add this, because I think Michael is spot on in what he's saying. And I would say captive shops really don't record a lot of their maintenance costs, which is a huge number. And if you can ever get them to start thinking that way, and they start calculating those maintenance costs, the PM, and just everything that goes along with the PM and even the predictive maintenance and all that, then that starts to really expose a lot of costs that everybody deems is free. I always hear, well, that labor's free. And to Michael's point, I had a guy tell me one time, he had a guy running the heat treat area for about 4 hours a day. And I asked him, I said, well, the labor here, how do you allocate that? He goes, well, it's free.
It's never free.
It's really not free. And he goes, no, it's free. He said, I've got him covered in another job we had. And so, you know, we talked about this a little earlier. That's why I start to use the word margin. And so I told him, I said, well, if you're pulling him over here and you're not doing that job, you're just taking margin away from the other job. And so I think that helps people understand
Right.
that the labor's not free, the forklifts aren't free, the cranes aren't free, the maintenance is not free. All those things are a cost that typically is not considered when they do that template that Michael's talking about.
And a cost that almost never is considered is the fact that when these folks are down and they're having us run their product for, pick the number, a week, 2 weeks, a month while they're repairing a piece of equipment, that really doesn't go into the cost calculation of what the heat department costs.
Right.
Well, I bet if you went and said, excuse me, but can we take about 5 minutes to go talk to your purchasing manager real quick? I really want to understand where he's getting this free forklift.
Yeah.
I've never gotten a free forklift before. So, all right. So really, I want to kind of give some summation to the storytelling. So really understanding your costs is a big deal. Understanding your strengths is a big deal. And then taking those over to and getting into the heat treat division and understanding where their conflict is in the process, where you can then understand the value you bring to the table, and then get in there and start talking your story. I mean, is there anything flowing from that you think you need to add on in terms of looking at the story?
Tom, I would say that you want to talk about your competencies. When you start this discussion, you don't want to be talking about what it is that they're not able to do or don't do or could do better.
Right.
I think what you want to talk about is what are your competencies? You have some technology to offer. You've got some capabilities to offer, and you want to make those offerings and make that kind of thing obvious to them and let them do the internal comparisons. You don't want to do that for them. And then it's all about demonstrated performance. So what have you done that is similar that they can relate to, that they would say, if you did this for them, there would be some benefit. At some point, they need to recognize that you're bringing something to them. And you have to be able to actually verbalize what that is.
So, I mean, I don't know if this is big in y'all's world, if you want customers talking to each other, but I mean, is it fair to say that because we're in such a rating, review, recommend society now, to say, look, if you have any questions about even any hesitation, we have a couple of our large customers we've done this with, we'd be more than happy to talk to you for a few moments just to give you assurance that, you know, we're doing for them. We do what for them, what we say we're doing for you. I mean, is that a practice at all? Or
We've actually done that in a couple of cases. And I go back to the fear. When that fear is so deep rooted, we have made some phone calls and people have shared some emails to kind of put their minds at ease. So yeah, I think that does help. And I would add this one thing. I think when you're looking at getting a captive's work, one thing that I think has always been helpful for us is just to ask the question, if there's anything that your internal heat treater could do better or to help you, what would it be? Right. And you'd be amazed at a laundry list of things that you'll get. Well, there's your opportunities right there.
They just told you.
There's his heartache. So if you can address those opportunities, you know, now you got a guy on board with them outsourcing it and you doing the work. So I would always ask that question.
Right.
And Tom, I would say in my world, if the OEMs, if you have a positive reputation with the OEMs, they also can and will refer folks. And when people are looking at you, they will refer to what the OEMs, what their opinion of your performance is.
Right.
And that's very key.
Right. So we've talked a little bit about costs. What are when we look internally at a heat treat plan? I mean, if you're going to do business with Fortune 500 companies, they're going to look at you and say, do these look like a Fortune 500 company heat treat that we'd want to do business with? So what do you think heat treaters listening in need to know that they need to walk out in their plant and know that we need to be doing these very specific things in our plant? So when they come in here, whether it's contract review, quality, or expertise, other than just showing them cost versus cost, what are the other key areas that a heat treater must be doing with excellence to make sure that when they get somebody in their plant or talking to them, that they know they got that stuff to back it up? What are some key elements?
So the one that goes without speaking and everyone recognizes it, you know, it's what do you look like? What's your housekeeping? Nobody understands what heat treating is, but people understand if things are clean and they're orderly. So if they're clean and they're orderly, and you're talking about what your capabilities are, those things make sense to them. If you're not clean and orderly, it doesn't matter what you have to say about what your capabilities are.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense. You know, and then it becomes a technology piece of this thing. So do you have data logging? Do you have, you know, what's your business system? How do you access information? How easily is it? Is it available to all people across your organization? Do we have access of that? How difficult or easy is it for us to contact your people? Do you have one person that's serving multiple tasks, or do you have different people that different folks can talk to? They want a contact for quality, engineering, logistics, billing, invoicing, quoting, all of those things. When you get to where your organization is that transparent to them, you're well on your way to being able to do something.
Awesome. What about you, Benny? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with Michael. I think for sure the housekeeping, you know, if people come into a dirty shop or a disorderly shop and those things, and you want to talk about high quality, you're sending a mixed message. So I certainly agree with that. But I would say also, you know, we invest a lot in things like the data logging and the latest testing equipment to make sure that we're even more accurate than we were before. And I think when people come in, you know, don't be ashamed of sharing that. Let people know what you're investing in. Show them that, you know, you're in it for the long haul. You want to grow. You want to use technology. You want to do all these things. And I think sometimes we're a little hesitant on sharing those things or tooting our own horn. And I think we should be proud of what we're doing and what we're investing in, and be willing to share those things with our customers.
So that leads really to the last question I want to tie into, which is investment in technology. I mean, what are the key things that you think that if a heat treat's going to go after captives, they're going to try and take advantage of this growth we're supposed to see from 2020 and beyond, the next 10 years in manufacturing with the largest consuming public out there? What are the types of things inside of a heat treat plant the heat treaters need to be investing in, whether it's data sharing, data logging? What are the kind of things you think that you need to have in your plants to serve those customers well?
Tom, I'm going to say that the two things that you hit upon, and that is data logging and data sharing, absolutely have to have it. We do trending. We receive information from our customers on the chemistries of the heat that they make things of, and we keep track of that. We'll say this heat is applicable, this one is not. We have a conversation about it. We're trying to predict success in this. And we spend a lot of time up front, and we have a lot of folks that are looking at those very sorts of things. You know, you've heard me say at meetings before, but the one thing in our business that we have all this data logging of all of these sensors that we have in our equipment, the one thing that we've not had that becomes so important to our customers is how are you handling my parts? So one of the things that we've done internally is we've actually put in a video system. And we're looking at a video system. I can show you what an order looks like when it comes in the plant. I can show you how an order is loaded. I can show you what the order looks like when it comes out of the furnace and when it goes into the final container. And you say, man, that's an awful lot of data and video data. And yes, it is. But here's what it provides, a level of certainty, and it's truly certainty, that you haven't mixed something, that you haven't mishandled it, that you've taken care of it. And that's the piece that we've always been missing. And believe it or not, that is as powerful a piece of information that I can give a customer as any piece of data.
Right.
Tom, I would agree with Michael, because we take pictures of each load, and when you're able to produce that for a customer and show them, here's a picture of the load, here's how it was racked in the furnace, there's a level of comfort and quality that I can't tell. We've had to do it several times, and the response has always been, wow, that's fantastic. I'm so glad you had that. But for me to answer your question, it was interesting. Your question, I think it's kind of interesting, because with our customers, they might give you 3 different answers to where, you know, I think you got to figure out what that is for your existing customers.
Right.
That you have to do.
Right.
Because they may not care about all the other things we're doing, so they don't see a value in that.
Right.
But we have a customer right now that, we have a customer service department that gives them a report in real time of how many pieces of what part number is on the truck with a tracking number with an ETA of arrival at their facility. That is absolutely, from a just-in-time standpoint, the most important piece of information in maintaining that work. Now, the quality, the data systems, all that, that's a given. You got to have that.
Right.
To get that work. But I would encourage everybody to find out what those one or two things are that are vital to that relationship. And those are the things that you better invest in, because that's what they expect. That's where the real value is.
So you took the same technology that Domino's is using to show when it's in the oven, when it's in the delivery guy's hands, and you said, can we have that?
Whatever you got to do.
Whatever it takes, man. Hey, by the way, if you do business with him, we'll send you a pizza every day.
Yeah. If I could build a furnace that was hooked to a truck, I'd just heat treat it while it was on the road.
Right. So the last thing I want to kind of cover real quick for everybody. So you've got them interested, and they're going to come to your plant. How do you approach that plant tour? I mean, do you have a sit down with your director of quality, your director of engineering, your sales guy, your safety? I mean, how do you approach all that plant visit so that you get the most bang and quality for the buck, so they walk away going, wow, that we got to do this?
Well, I'll tell you what we've done in the past that's worked. You always want to get everybody together and huddle up and talk about it. And it shouldn't be news to anybody that here's the parts, and we all know the parts. Right. Processing and all that. But, a lot of times we'll generate maybe a work order that would replicate their parts. And they'll walk, we tell them, be the part, take the work order. And I've had customers walk through with their work order and talk to guys out on the floor and ask them about a step. What would you do here? Because when they hear it from a guy on the floor saying what he's going to do to their part, and they can interact with the guys doing it, I think, again, it kind of, that fear factor goes down a notch when they do that. And we've got great people here, so they do that very well, and that interaction is really good. But I think there's a comfort level when customers come in and they can take that work order and walk the floor and just really see what their part's going to go through from start to finish. And we really try to introduce them to everybody. It's like Michael was saying, you got all these people from quality to customer service to invoicing. Introduce them to those people so that they can at least, get a response from someone, see someone.
Right.
So that's typically what we'll do.
Right.
So Tom, Benny has hit right upon that, and that is one of the things that we tell our new customers is that obviously we don't heat treat anything for you.
Right.
We want to go and let's go and talk to the folks that do, so that you get that, as he said, a level of comfort with what it is.
Right.
I mean, we'll even make up a CAD drawing maybe that shows how parts will be fixtured, and then we'll go out and look at something that's very similar. We may simulate loading on something with just a prototype set of fixturing if it's a distortion critical part or something like that. But it's all about getting them out there and letting them see what people are doing things, because we have some technology on the floor that people are using that's pretty impressive.
Right. Absolutely. So now we're down to just some final comment. We've talked about a bunch of stuff. I know one of our members, Steve Metz, talked about, could we come up with a document that could kind of be a summary and really itemize, here's the things you want to make sure you never forget when you're approaching a captive. And I'd say to Steve, we'll review this tape, and we'll actually come up with that over the course of the next month or so, see if we can come up with a key document that can help assign these points, and you can look at them. So we'll do that for the members. So Michael, any final comments from you to our members on going after captives? You've heard a lot. This is the one final thing I think you should walk away with.
So it's flexibility and outlook. This is not a one size fits all. Every situation is unique. You have to go into it with an open mind. If there's one thing that you're going to say that I have to do, it's about solving problems.
Right.
You can find a problem and solve it. As Benny said, everybody's got some hot button of one thing or two things that are really significant to them. You find that and you resolve that, you're on your way.
Awesome. Benny?
I would say, I think if people are considering moving it from captive to a commercial heat treat, there's an aggravation there for them. my thing would be, how do you turn an aggravation into an opportunity?
Right.
So you've got to get all your people on board to where everyone has buy-in. How do we do this and do it well? Because here's the demands, and we've got to meet these demands, and they're usually pretty big demands. But I think when you get that buy-in and you can go back to the captive shop, it's a much easier sell when you've got the buy-in from the people at your own facility. So I think you got to include everybody in that process.
Well, and I think, Benny, we mentioned it before this call, but we talked about how many heat treats think they're a job shop, where the only time they call somebody is when they're called to serve a need, as opposed to taking the other rap and say, you know what, we want to be in the captive heat treat market. We're going to develop a strategy, a marketing strategy, a sales strategy, and we're going to go out and tell the world about what we can do for them and what we can solve, and see if who that hits home with. So right. would you say that's a better? I mean, we have to get outside that marketing space.
Yeah, for me, when I was out on the road, for me, the captives were always at the top of my list, just because I knew there was business there.
Right.
And typically, if they bought equipment, there was a good volume of business there.
Yeah.
So those things were always at the top of my list. That sometimes they're a little tougher egg to crack, but it takes time, and I think you have to work that, develop relationships, and I think that's what Michael was saying. You develop those relationships in different departments. But I think certainly, that it was always intriguing to me, the captive shops, because I never really understood why they always did it themselves.
Right. Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, Michael, Benny, I know your time is valuable. Thank you so much. I know this has been very, very helpful to a lot of our members that are online. It will be to those that watch it afterward. Members, we appreciate you so much. And I want you to mark on your calendar, November 26th at 2 p.m. is our next Heat Treat Live, where we're going to talk about, we've just finished up the AMEC meeting in aerospace, the NADCAP meeting, CQI9, automotive, a whole host of ASTM, and we're going to give you the who's of what you need to know about specs on November 26th at 2 p.m. I know it's the week of Thanksgiving. I think it's Tuesday. We know many of you will be in the office. It'll be videotaped, and you can see it, but put it on your calendar, November 26th at 2 p.m. So, gentlemen, thank you very much again. Members, you're not just strong, you're MTI strong. I'm Tom Morrison. We'll see you next month. Have a great day.
Have a good day.